anyone that's been playing NU lately knows that Tsareena is one of the maybe 5 or so best Pokemon. Certainly one of the 5 or so most used Pokemon if we're basing this off of the recent tier shifts. And it's pretty easy to see why. I mean, it's a rapid spinner, gives you a knockoff. It does quite a lot in one slot, but today we're going to talk about how Tsareena manages to run essentially the same damn set all the time. And still be one of the best NU Pokemon. Of course, you've been enjoying this type of content. You love the PS Lives, you love the tiering, coverage, you love the little spotlight videos, man. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not already subscribed. I'm hitting 10K by the end of the year. That's whether you want me to or not, so you may as well join the movement. Don't get left in the dust. Just subscribe now, man. So, Tsareena. I have right now on the screen, right here, what I'm going to say is the most standard Tsareena set. And why am I calling this the most standard one? Well, for a couple reasons. One, it's probably the 4 easiest moves to put on Tsareena. And 2, this is always going to offer you a pretty consistent spinner and general source of utility. So of course you always got Power Whip. You need a stab move. Power Whip is your best option. But then I threw the trifecta of great utility moves. You know, you got Knockoff, because Knockoff is a great move. Tsareena has Rapid Spin, so it naturally fits Spike's teams. You want Knockoff on a lot of Pokemon so that you can remove Heavy Duty Boots and actually get your Spikes to do stuff. And then, of course, U-Turn, because this is one of the lowest drawback moves ever added to Pokemon. And then we get to Rapid Spin. Now, part of y'all may be saying, Rabia, it's just Rapid Spin. Well, let's do a little thought experiment real quick. We're going to do DS Rapid Spin / Defog, and an NU PUBL because they added the Oricoros, and this. This is our list of hazard removal, and if you look at this, you may notice while there's a lot of Pokemon here, not a lot of them are like super amazing. Altaria is a fine defogger. Lug is a good spinner, but you get like Braviary's not good at defogging. Hisui Braviary, you don't want to use it for defog. Colossal's just kind of niche. You end up really needing to go out of your way to justify it. Cramorant's not very good. Regular Decidueye has not been seen in years. Hisui does it good, mon. New mon and good. Sucks, bad, terrible. Not running Spin on Hitmonlee. I'm not wasting that as a slot. Hitmontop, always gonna be a mon that I feel is a little hard to justify. Morpeko, Lamau. Oricorio, this? No. Also, I did PUBL, and for some reason it didn't oh, right. It doesn't include all the forms. So, Pom Pom and Sensu count in this, and Defog Pom Pom just hasn't been used in a long time because it's too frail. The mon is just too frail to be wasting turns defogging, and with how good Quiver Dance is, you're much better off running that. Sandslash is just better ground types. A lot of the time people aren't running Sandslash. Alolan Sandslash, it's not very bulky, and that initial defensive typing is really, really bad, especially when you look at a lot of our special attackers. We have a lot of fire types. We have a lot of mons as well that run coverage for Sandslash, and so that further compromises your pretty bad initial defensive typing. Defog Scyther just not getting used anymore because a lot of the rockers nowadays are just a little too bulky for it to beat. Tatsugiri is kind of limited to certain offenses. Toedscruel is terrible. So a lot of these Pokemon, you notice we had caveats to them, or they just aren't very good. Tsareena ends up being so good as a result because there's really nothing to it. It's just a good mon. And a lot of that is because despite this, as I'm displaying it here, being the most common 4 moves, at least I think it is. Maybe it's probably not if you're on the usage. But despite it having this as a very spammable 4 move slot option, you have so much random versatility that you could throw onto this mon. It's quite good. You have a lot that you can do to make this mod a lot better and to enable other Pokemon in the tier. And I think that's really the key part of this. What Tsareena does to enable your teammates. So one of the most common options that you're going to see here is like Triple Axle. Triple Axle Tsareena. Technically, yes, it hits Flygon, but it's not really the important part here. If we like to go down all the way to the bottom, there's a certain Pokemon named Vileplume. And Vileplume, although it's maybe not as common as it could be right now, it is still a very solid option for a bulky poison type. And think about some of the best setup sweepers in the tier. Think about a certain watery bull friend. We're talking Taurus Paldia, baby. Spell Axel Tsareena plus bulk up Paldean Tauros is one of my favorite cores to run. Whether it's on an offense team where you could still do Tsareena, maybe change the EVs a little bit. But whether it's on offense, whether it's on balance, whether it's even on something maybe a little bulkier. Bulk up Water Poros is incredible when paired with Axel Tsareena, because Tsarena's very good at drawing in not only Vileplume, but also Dragalge. And although Dragalge is maybe not as bad to break through because it's, you know, a little less physically bulky than Vileplume, it is still standing in the way of a Tauros. You better be Terra Steel as well if you run into Dragalge, and you want to try and take that trade versus it. And so having Tsareena being able to very, very reliably draw them in and weaken them down with Triple Axel is quite good. And it's just a very natural pairing as well, because having Spin is really good on a bulk up mon like Poros that otherwise is going to get folded up by T-Spike. And typically as well, you'd like to be able to retain that set ambiguity with Watered Poros. Of course, Scarf's a very common set on it. I'm not going to say the best Scarfer because I think Flygon is, but it's probably the second best Scarfer in the tier. And to be able to retain that ambiguity over whether or not I have a choice Scarf is very nice. So Spin works well for that as well. And yeah, I mean, they work very well off each other. Even just something like this, having knockoff to get rid of, say, like Galarian Slowbro's helmet, just means that it's a little easier to break that mon later on once you bulk up. Other coverage though, you got a lot of options, and I'm probably gonna mostly work off of this move slot. Just know that you could technically take knockoff as well. It's just a free move though, so I'd probably always run knock. But another move is pretty reliable, high jump kick. Now part of high jump kick is, yes, this is a spinner. Spinners are meant to have good matchups against hazard removers, or not hazard removers, hazard setters. What's one of the most common hazard setters? Registeel. Here you go, here's coverage. So high jump kick's pretty nice though, because a lot of the hazard setters you actually don't have a super effective move for. Otherwise, high jump kick gives you a bit more damage output versus a Pokemon like, say, Registeel. It does even more than Power Whip and Knockoff will to Copper. It also gives you technically coverage for like Colossal, if you care. Sometimes Colossal can be a little bit annoying, as we've seen in my videos. It's very nice to have high jump kick for that. I'd actually say most importantly though, high jump kick gives you a way to hit Emboar. Emboar is an incredible Pokemon in this tier. I almost actually was going to do the spotlight video on Emboar, but I decided, you know what? I'm going to keep that one for a little bit later. Because Emboar, there's a lot to talk about with that mon. I think people are doing well to experiment. We can go further. We can go further. But high jump kick makes it so Emboar doesn't switch into you. Like, notice the two other variants we showed off. U-turn, Axel. Like, yeah, you can always U-turn on Emboar. That's still good to maintain momentum. But having high jump kick to just two-shot it, ooh, it's very good. And of course, coverage for Duraludon is very important, because otherwise you're like going for a knockoff and there's not much follow-up other than, you know, if you got U-turn or if you're gonna hard switch. So having the option to just pop it for real damage is always good. I think it's not like the best move ever to run, but it does have some application. And then other moves, what else did I want to talk about? I think next we could talk about, actually, you know what we're gonna do? Shoutouts Fish Brat for this one. The Terrifier set. So, why does this actually end up being kind of decent? Because it may seem like it's a little bit just of a meme, and admittedly, it's not like it's the best. But, you'll notice it's very similar coverage to high jump kick. It hits steel types. Terra Blast Fire is good for that. Terra Blast Fire also gives you coverage still for Vileplume. So you're able to still try and weaken that for something like a Water Tauros. Even hits Brute Bonnet too if you just need extra coverage for Brute Bonnet. The nice thing as well is Fire does offer some of the defensive utility of Dragon, but in some ways it's a little better if you're talking about defensively terraing a Tsareena. So most of the time you're terraing it versus like fire types. The only unfortunate part about going for Terra Dragon is something like Inteleon, where Ice Beam is common coverage. And it can be a little unfortunate, because now you're weak to that. So going for, like, you can't really Terra versus an Inteleon. I mean, you can't really Terra versus it to begin with Tsareena, because it's kind of pointless. But it is nice to be able to, if you want, have that panic button even versus it. Go for Terra Fire, resist the Ice Beam, and smash it with Power Whip. But back to Terra Fire, the nice thing is mostly you still get a lot of what you need out of Dragon when you're talking about the Terra, and although you lose your resistance to water, you do keep the ice, or you don't keep it, you do gain an ice resistance. You even gain a steel resistance, so it improves your overall matchup versus a lot of the other hazard setters too, just by virtue of now you resist their best stab move. I mean, the two best rockers in the tier are probably Copperage and Registeel, right? It is nice to have a better matchup against those two. Yes, they have coverage, but that initial turn, they're not going to go for their coverage versus you. So it works out well. Now, I said Tsareena basically runs the same damn set all the time. Introducing now. Is that divisible by 8? No. But yes, introducing now. You know, buy it while you still can. Just straight up defensive Tsareena. Because this is definitely an option. You do more like, probably something like Terra Poison. But physically defensive Tsareena is honestly not a bad spinner option either in you. If we look at a lot of the physical breakers in the tier, Tsareena's not that bad into a lot of them, especially when you give it the bulk to take some hits. So some of these mons are gonna table you no matter what. Of course, like something, for example, there was one that I scrolled past I was wanting to mention, something like Gallade. There's not a lot that you could do about Gallade running you over. If you're Tsareena, that's just kind of always happening. But having extra bulk versus Pokemon like, say, Water Tauros, that's very good. Having extra bulk versus Iron Thorns, because he's up here, that's very good. Having extra bulk after a Terrastalize even versus something like, say, a, what's another fighting type? A Palmot. Maybe you need to Terra Poison just to take the CC better. You're probably taking a lot from Double Shock still, but it does make the trade a little bit less terrible, which I think is pretty nice. And of course, too, it's very useful when you're talking about how this mon matches up against the hazard setters. Having all of this extra bulk just does you a lot of wonders. It makes it a lot easier to try and trade hits with them and actually get your rapid spin going. And with Synthesis, you're not actually worried about that slow, painful death that Tsareena may suffer otherwise. I don't remember which tournament game it was that we covered recently. There was one, though, I remember. I remember now. It was in the Shinjineer video where we were talking about Galarian Slowbro, how a lot of people have been wanting it banned. Just because, I mean, and Shinjin's games work really well to display that, but also, there were some sequences we saw, Tsareena taking versus Copperajah, where it would try and spin and keep the rocks away. A lot of the time, it would still lose the exchange because Raj is just too strong, and the Tsareena wouldn't have Synthesis, so there wasn't really any way to, you know, deny Raj the rocks by the end of it. At the very least, you were losing your Tsareena. Maybe you weaken the Copperajah enough to prevent rocks, but maybe you don't. And maybe you just end up wasting your entire Pokemon. So having Synthesis to actually stick around a lot longer is quite nice. And I saw Whip here. I do think an option worth considering is Drop Kick. You lower attack stuff. Maybe this is useful if you're matched up against something like, say, Dragonance Flygon, for example. Or even if you needed to, like, Drop Kick into a Flamigo. If you Terra, you could potentially drop... I was gonna say Flamigo. You can't even do it versus that because it's scrappy. What's a different fighter that you can actually Drop Kick? Palmot. That's actually more practical there. Where you Drop Kick the Palmot and it just can't two-shot you anymore. And then maybe you're able to Synthesis it. A Synthesis versus it as you stall it out of Life Orb Recoil. I think that's an option. Even if you need to Drop Kick like a Staraptor or something, I mean, I don't know if it lets you avoid a two-shot, because Tsareena's physical bulk. If we're talking a Reckless Staraptor melee, I'm not too sure that actually is saving you, but it may make it a little bit easier. And I do want to also talk about just another way you can work with the more utility Tsareenas. You can do something like this even, where you just go max HP, max speed instead, or maybe don't go max speed, just go near max speed. This, and I'd probably still recommend the power of Power Whip at this point. I think Drop Kick works decently on defensive sets since you're not looking to break. But if you got the extra speed, you may as well capitalize on that and hit things now that you actually outspeed a little bit harder. But this works nicely still. You still get a lot of bulk, and instead of being outsped now by things like, say, Brute Bonnet and I was gonna say Basket Legion, but I don't think that's actually outspeeding you. Unless it's like Scarf or Under Rain. So there's that. But like I said, that way you do always get the jump on the, what's it called? I literally just set them on, I forgot. Oh well. You can outspeed maybe like Imbor and finish off with a Power Whip. You outrun Florges, which is always nice to have. You'll generally outrun Goodrill. You'll outrun Grimmsnarl this way as well, guaranteed. It's very, very nice. Queenly Majesty is actually something that I think is very, very key about this mon as well. Because if you look at Inu, and we take a look down the tier and talk about all the forms of priority, Queenly Majesty denies so many of these Pokemon. And maybe sometimes it doesn't actually matter because they're not mons you'd 1v1 under most circumstances. But it is still helpful that if Tsareena is being relied on to finish them off, if they're not faster, they like actually just can't go for the priority. Or even just having a way to pivot around the priority, right? Like, even if I'm talking about Lucario, if I think it's about to E-speed me, I can go Tsareena. I'm literally just immune to that. And then maybe from there, I'm able to pivot and say, like, I was going to say Vileplume. We're not running Tsareena plus Vileplume, I don't think. But maybe from there, I pivot in, I'm on, like, Gligar on the CC. And it just gives you a little bit of extra leeway. But, like, we look at this, right? Ambipom Fake Out. You've seen me deny a million Ambipoms a Fake Out. Arcanine E-Speed, it's probably only relevant. It's probably only relevant if you are going to Terrastalize. But it could allow you to maybe finish a 1v1 off versus an Arcanine. Brute Bonnet, you already kind of... You don't really beat Brute Bonnet, but it helps that if you're getting a good trade. This is mostly practical, by the way, on like U-turn or Axel variants, but we'll say U-turn for now. Being able to take those early damage exchanges and then just always come out on top at the very end, as it can't pick you off with Sucker Punch. That is just pretty nice to have. Imbor, we've seen some Sucker Punch on Imbor. So once again, this really just is kind of like the Arcanine point, where if you are able to weaken it early on, then it is nice to be able to just reliably pick it off later. Flygon First Impression, it's probably not ever going to bother with First Impression versus a Tsareena anyway. I mean, I'd rather just U-turn or Outrage. This does come back, though, to the point we said about Lucario, where if you are predicting them to go for the revenge-killing move, it is always nice to be able to pivot into the mon that will literally not take damage from it. Grimmsnarl, and even Grafaiai here, because we could talk about Prankster. Denying Prankster is great, but more importantly with Grimm, not being able to get hit by Sucker Punch is really, really nice if you're trying to pivot around it. It's a lot of the same idea that you get with Brute Bonnet, so there's that. Hitmontop, this mod runs like 57 different priority moves on the same set, so you can win versus it pretty consistently. You may have to dedicate Terra, because a lot of them will run Triple Axle as well, and that's kind of lame. So making sure that you don't get hit by that is good. Klefki, just like the other mons. This is actually a very nice one as well, where Queenly Majesty works out so nicely for you. Because how many times have I had to take these dumb trades with Klefkis, with my Tsareena just spamming Power Whip, and making sure that they don't get to keep their spikes up. And the nice thing, again, they can't switcheroo. Maybe they can. I don't know how switcheroo works, actually, versus Queenly Majesty. I assume it still blocks it. They can't T-Wave you, that's the more relevant one to say. Which is always good, just to make sure that you don't get annoyed. A bit of paralysis. Lucario, we already mentioned. Pawmot, once again, this isn't really relevant at all. Outside of, like, if you're trying to pivot because you know they're going for a Rock Punch, because otherwise Pawmot's just going to CC a Tsareena. Or if you Terrastalize, maybe I'm double shocking you. But if I have a mon out like Inteleon, that Pawmot's sent out to revenge kill and they're going to Mach Punch me, it is nice to be able to switch Tsareena in and just take 0 damage. Once again, it is relevant enough. Staraptor, quick attack Staraptor, Lamau. Water Poros, this one literally doesn't... I resist Aqua Jet, bro. It's not doing damage to me anyway, but sure. Thundurus can't Prankster T-Wave you. That's also really good. And it's just... There are a lot of mons in the tier that Queenly Majesty is actually just nice. Whether it's for helping it take overall trades versus these Pokemon, if that's particularly relevant to the Sucker Punch users, or if you're just trying to use Tsareena to pivot around certain Pokemon better, like an Arcanine with E-Speed or an Imbor with Sucker Punch. And the Imbor point really there isn't too important. That's just, we're thinking about Imbor trying to get a last hit off versus Tsareena there. It's mostly relevant to say, the Grim Snarl point, and even denying just Prankster overall. That's where I think Queenly Majesty is the most typically applicable. I guess even a Lucario, though, is pretty fair to mention, because Luke might... Say you had High Jump Kick on a Tsareena set. I think, one, High Jump Kick Oko's Lucario, but, you know, if I've Terastallized into a Poison type, they may be going for the E-Speed, or they may want to try and E-Speed me, but now they can't. Does that mean they won't do damage? So yeah, I mean, that's Tsareena. I think it's pretty impressive how we have one Mon that runs the same damn set practically every time, and it still works. Every game. It reminds me quite a bit of Sandaconda, where, yes, Sandaconda had coil sets as well, which that added to how good it was, along with it being the only ground type. But the thing with Tsareena is it's the same utility set, just with some different moves or EVs. And I think it's cool to see how, because of the meta around it, how there is just an inherent high need for a, what's it called? A spinner that does not cede a ton of control over to other teams. That's really where you see Avalugg and Altaria builds struggle a little bit more. It's nice to have a Mon that can give you a little bit more just offensive pressure as well, and still give you a lot of support just through, I mean, the normal moves it wants to run. So, I hope y'all enjoyed this. This is just, at the end of the day, man, this is 21.5 minutes of me waffling about a Pokemon that some NU users seem to think that I have a crush on. I don't. I'm not Renchan and his weird obsession with Salazzle. If you know, you know. I hope y'all enjoyed that, man. Use this mod. It's worth your time. It is worth it. I know it gets annoying seeing this on every team that I use. That's OU. I know you see a lot of Tsareena probably down through here. I'm not even really looking at my builder right now. I don't actually see that much. Maybe more down here? You know what? That's crazy. I actually haven't used a ton of Tsareena, but I should be. And that's the lesson to take from this. I'll catch y'all next time, and thanks for watching. Peace.